like scary movies?
I'm getting ready to watch a video.
You making popcorn? What's your favorite?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hi everybody, I'm George and welcome to the best little horror house in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest at least. And this week we're keeping it local, talking with another Philly boy. He's juggling about 10 roles with No Master, the group behind the Blobfest, and George's heart-winning short, Guard Dog. Please welcome Josh Jones. How's it going, dude?
Pretty good.
Keeping it short, keeping it sweet. I love it. Really excited to have you here. I love your work. Everything that I've seen from you guys has been just hilarious, scary, effective, really, really great stuff. I'm really curious to hear about your history with horror, where it all started for you.
Well, I think people love horror because they love to be scared. Is a lie. That's a lie. The man wants you to believe that mankind wants to be scared. They do not want to be scared. They would rather be happy.
What the?
And my history with horror is about a man seeking his happiness. You see, I brought it around. I know.
That was nice.
This is an anecdote. You're talking to a master of storytelling. I am a director. And so as a storyteller, it's important that I'm happy. And to be happy, I decided not too long ago to focus on one of the things that I kept coming back to, which was horror. I started to think about my career in filmmaking, doing animation and music and directing. And then I thought I should do more commercial directing. So I talked to a commercial director friend of mine. He's a great guy, and he had some great advice. He's like, you gotta make more upscale stuff. So you're gonna have to make stuff on spec, and you're gonna have to find local vendors or people you know run businesses and solicit them and say, gee, can I make a free commercial for your donut shop? And they'll be like, no or yes. And so I was like, yeah, okay, that's a great idea. And then I come up with a modest budget for it, scrap together something that looks really, really nice, looks really, really expensive, and then I can start to solicit for better jobs in commercials. And I started reaching out to people, and I realized I don't want to do this. I don't even want to do this at all. Like, I think I want to do it because I think it'll make me money, but I don't even want money bad enough to do this. Like, what will happen? What if I succeed? In that case, I'll just be doing this. No way am I going to keep doing this. So I was like, I can do horror. I keep coming back to horror. Even when I was just doing music, even when I was just in bands, horror would come up as a theme inappropriately on albums where it was like, why does this sound so spooky, Josh? It's like, because I always wanted to do a horror soundtrack, you guys. And they just have to tolerate it. But not tolerate it no more. For they are gone, those days and those people. Well, they're back, actually. They're all involved again. But now they know what they're getting into.
And now you have an outlet.
It's only been a few years in my life where, maybe a couple years in my life, a few meaning 3 and a couple meaning 2, of course. A couple years in my life, I'd say, where I didn't really have a creative outlet, and they were the worst years. They were just awful. And I made a bunch of money, and I really didn't like it, and I really didn't feel great. But then, now I got outlets.
There you go. There you go. Was horror something that you were always watching, and you were just like, oh, I just need to be making it as well?
Yeah, no, I grew up I would guess every single person that you've ever talked to on this podcast is like grow up watching horror, maybe way too young, all that stuff. And, watched with my friends in high school, really into it. There was a short period where I really wasn't into it because I was like, I want to take my art seriously and learn about painters and be a painter and musician.
Chiaroscuro.
Yeah, I got to learn about light and composition and everything, but meaning also, because like, what do these blobs mean? These are important. I don't have time for Evil Dead. And then I met my wife, and she was like, I don't watch a lot of movies, but I love horror. And I was like, I guess I'm back into horror, baby. And that was when I was 19. So it was about a year where I was pretentious enough to think I didn't want to be more involved with horror or watch horror. But yeah.
Definitely, that is one of the main archetypes that comes across for guests. But also, you might have people like myself who were very much not into horror as a kid, scared shitless of everything, but always had that sort of fascination with it. And then eventually you just say, I gotta just suck it up. And I gotta just watch these damn movies.
Well, did it leave you? Because I was not like a child, like, I'm not afraid of this. I'm just, as a 9-year-old, I'm analyzing Pet Sematary as a piece of work. I want to understand the camera moves. No, I didn't think about any of that. I was like, that is real. That cat is still alive. nothing can kill it. And it will one day find me.
Sometimes dead is better.
Sometimes dead is better. And this is just me personally. I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. I just don't want to live my life again.
Oh, very interesting.
You know? Call me crazy.
That's really good. You should write that down, I think.
And I've already forgotten it.
That's a tale as old as time. I'm curious about your favorite subgenre, because even in just the stuff of yours that I've seen, you've sort of hit a couple of different areas of horror. So I want to know not only about your favorite subgenre to watch, but I'm also curious if that's different from what you like to make.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer. I don't think I have a favorite subgenre. There's some things that I come back to a lot, probably because of my age. I come back to 80s horror a lot. But then 80s, early 90s stuff like just resonates with me in a nostalgic and comforting way. Mm-hmm. But some of my favorite stuff, I don't think I could say any of it fits into a subgenre like, oh, I just love ghosts or the paranormal, or I love stuff like the movie C.H.U.D. that focuses on sociopolitical ideas couched in campy monsters and green slime and ooze. I mean, both of those are my favorite at the same time.
Sure.
And many others.
So while I really, really enjoyed the Jim Paul's anti-monster jujitsu masterclass training for kids video that y'all did with No Master, I did want to talk a little bit about your upcoming short, Pop. I really liked in Pop the way that you handled lighting specifically and the shadows to make the really dingy basement. Those outside the area may not know that many of the basements in this area are unfinished, low concrete ceilings and walls. In college, a lot of the parties were in those basements, so they stank of beer and sweat. Very pungent sense memories. Then on Friday the 13th in October last year, I went to the Edgar Allan Poe house here in Philly and went into the basement, and it's scary and dark, and you're like, oh yeah, I'd be fucked up too if I had to go down here constantly without electricity.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to really say, first off, incredible work with the lighting and shadows, everything. Really spooky, really great.
Thank you so much. A big shout out to our gaff, Kevin Gallagher, who is one of my partners at our studio in Fishtown Small Mall. Kevin Gallagher is also a producer. He's done a couple horror movies in Philadelphia, American Exorcist and Alpha Girls. And Fallon is his partner, who was also the lead in our new short, Pop. And Devin Vocal, who was the DP and had a lot of the vision for how the lighting was going to go. And he put the lighting crew together, and, we worked together on it very much, but I couldn't execute any of that. I've worked as a gaff and a grip in a very minimal capacity. And both of them have done, especially Kevin Gallagher, have done a ton of high end stuff.
Awesome. Well, it comes across.
I'm lucky just to have access to both of them.
You also managed to get this kind of cool faint in the short, which is impressive considering it's just over 6 minutes. There is sort of an illusion that makes you think, oh, this might be about our lead character sort of killing people to get up the wait list. And instead it becomes something very different. I'm curious about how much the constraints sort of play into your concepting. Ultimately, what you see of the thing at the end is not so much, right? It's pretty kept under wraps. Are you like, oh, this is what we're going to be able to execute, so let's sort of work around designing this specific piece of it to be the best that it can? Or do you sort of have an idea and then work backwards to scale it down once you realize sort of what the limitations are?
I had a dream where, and I frequently have nightmares. I have problems sleeping in general, and I have a lot of nightmares. Much to my wife's chagrin, many of these nightmares end with me going, and, or sometimes she said, and I, sort of wasn't there for that, but she's told me that I like chant in my sleep, which is
nice,
absolutely terrifying for her, But she loves horror, right? So I had this dream where I was being pursued by a snake, and I climbed up the side of a house, and I was trying to figure out how to get my leg around the awning once I had climbed up the side of the house. And the snake, I was like, okay, the snake can't come up here and get me. And I looked down, and it just kept getting higher and higher until I was just perplexed. It was like, it was lifting, imagine like a cobra, how a cobra sort of comes up, it sort of stands almost on itself, and then it poises itself to strike. And it did exactly that. And I remember just watching it being like, I have no time to get away from this thing. And I've got nowhere to go. I could drop. And, the momentary thoughts in your head are like, how would I survive if I fell? It would still just come right back to where I am. Like, and then before I had time to wrangle all those thoughts, it attacked me and I woke up. And that mixed with the concept of how a lot of people's fears, and, mine to a certain degree, but I remember asking my dad, who's a very different person from I am, and very tough person, very hardworking person, cares about things like that. I asked him one time what he was afraid of, because he was constantly getting injured. He was not the kind of person that was faint of heart, had been through a lot, both physically and mentally in his life, and seemed fine, mostly. And I asked him one time, what is the thing that scares you the most? And he's like, not being able to take care of myself or the other people around me. Being paralyzed, it was an example he gave, was, a great fear, because it would kill me to have to be taken care of. And part of the story that I wanted to tell was just what scares me, what scares other people, right? And then it's really to get back to what you're asking about, how do you do I retrofit everything so that it can actually be shot and can work within like the location that I can get access to? Because obviously this is all independent. I funded all of it myself and, tried to keep his costs down as much as humanly possible, of course, while not making it look cheap.
Right.
Part of it is retrofitting. Part of it is I have a script. I have a cast in mind. I'm going to write to their strengths. And I also am going to try to stay true to what the heart of this is. Meantime, I have to get these practical props in production. So there's a question of like the location has to fit with that thing. And then also I've got to find this location. I just happened to get very lucky and I got a location. A friend of mine was working on a house and it was mostly vacant. And fortunately we had delays and he didn't get the house in order. But by the time we had the delays, so we had lots of wiggle room. So once I saw the house, and I had to recast a little bit for scheduling conflicts. Once I saw the house and I had the cast set up and I knew what the scale of everything was and I knew basically what the crew was, I just rewrote until the day. And, every tiny little changes. And even on the day, it's like, okay, that didn't sound right coming out of you. We're going to do a take like this and just move as quickly as possible, as many shots as possible. So how do you make all that work? You just got to be really flexible. You got to be really flexible and keep an eye on what is scary. Understand your fundamentals, I think is a good, I'm talking like I know, but, I made a couple shorts, right? But this is how I think of it, I'll say.
Right.
I'm not going to tell anybody exactly what they should do, but I think of it like, what are the fundamentals? It's, horror, when you're really trying to make a scare, is mechanical in nature. It's like a joke. It shouldn't feel mechanical, but you know where your setup is. You know what has to hit. You know what the audience has to understand in the context so that the punchline lands. Mm-hmm. And the same with a scare. You've got to take people off guard. And a great way to do that is to have characters that aren't talking about what the horror is seemingly at all. They're their own people living their own lives, and they're compelling because you like and dislike them at the same time. You want them to win. You want them to succeed as much as you might want them to fail. And that's really great to distract people. Keep your hand waving in one direction. And then the next thing, something falls or somebody, pops out from somewhere and
phone rings, perhaps.
The phone ring. That's a good one. I'll write that one down. Yeah. So that's how I think of it.
It definitely works. Congratulations on Pop.
Thank you.
It is really, really awesome.
Thank you so much.
But the movie we're talking about today is C.H.U.D, directed by Douglas Cheek and released in 1984. Now, one of the main characters of the C.H.U.D story is producer Andrew Bonamy, who was very, quote, hands-on, which you can read as meddlesome for a producer.
Ooh.
Reading between the lines of his contemporaneous Fangoria interview was really, really fascinating. Previous to this movie, he'd worked on an adaptation of Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, saying, "I thought this was going to be a classic movie from a classic book. One that would allow me to go to cocktail parties and say, I produced this film, which means I'm literate, and people from high school will like me, and college people will call me up and ask me to give me lectures." The film, however, didn't make any money. So
Yeah.
things are not going great for him off the bat.
Not a lot of juice came out of that particular picture, obviously. I mean, it was laden with a lot of New York hopefuls at the time and people who did go on to do a lot. And some people who just had really, really great, solid character actor careers. John Goodman, I'm not going to list off everybody. John Goodman has a very tiny role in it, just as John Hurd and Daniel Stern have lead roles in it. I remember watching it, finally getting to watch it for the first time about 12 years ago, maybe a little longer. I had already finished and been really obsessed with The Wire. And I remember watching C.H.U.D. and being like, well, I got to watch C.H.U.D. sometime. I mean, it's got nuclear waste. It's got monsters. It's the 80s. Like, well, it's great. But it was one of those things that's like a fine wine for you. You know, I don't know about other horror fans, but there's certain movies that I'm like, I know I'm going to watch this one day. I'm saving it. So I'm not just going to watch it like some night. I'm going to be like, okay, this is the night I'm watching C.H.U.D. And I watched it and then I watched it many, many other times immediately after because it was so much more complex than I expected it to be. The writing and the performances and the cut of it was so much deeper than I expected it to be. And I always talk about it like it's an 80s New York horror monster movie that feels like The Wire. It feels like you're never like, you know, you ask anybody what C.H.U.D. means and you really got to pay attention to find out, you know? It's like in The Wire when they're talking, they keep using nomenclature like PC and you're like, what is PC? I don't work at a police station. I'm not a lawyer. What does that mean? And through context, you learn it, right? Actually, Frankie Faison, who was eventually commissioner in The Wire, was in C.H.U.D., one of the cops with the flamethrowers in the sewers.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I think about that one. The Wire in the 80s horror. The complexity of having Daniel Stern's character have this like hustle with another cop who they have a specific relationship with. He's sort of, Daniel Stern is almost like a slightly different circumstances, but he runs a soup kitchen in the movie. And he's a lot like Bubbles in The Wire, where he goes to the bottom of the bottom and he goes right to the top just because he's who he is. He's got enough charisma and enough confidence that there's not a place that Bubs can't fit in, you know?
Smooth operator.
He's a smooth operator. And he gets into this room covered in grease and grime and not showered clearly. And he has a very frank discussion where he tries to leverage some big bureaucratic fat cats who are running a smuggle game, which is like the monster of the movie is commerce. It's not.
That's right.
It's not actually the C.H.U.Ds. The C.H.U.Ds are the victims of commerce. The C.H.U.Ds were people. Actually, another Wire connection. The guy, I forget the actor's name, but the guy who played the Greek in the second season of The Wire, everybody's favorite, was one of the homeless people who starts to lose his mind because of his prolonged exposure to radioactive material.
Right.
Yeah.
They had access to these great actors because of where they were situated on the art scene of New York and being able to sort of, you know, you get John Hurd and he is able to pull people who he knows and Daniel Stern is able to talk to some of the people that he's been working with. And you just sort of build up this cast that helps to elevate the material that it's working in, which is, as you say, already very interesting and complex, more so than one might anticipate. And in that way, it really reminds me of what I like about the movie, which is that it feels a lot like the sort of atomic age horror of the 50s and stuff, where it is very much that paranoid feeling and very much like we the people versus the government, the man. This movie, I would say that the movie it reminds me most of is Q the Winged Serpent.
Yeah.
And it is just so like Joe Schmo is already put upon. And how can a monster story change that dynamic?
Right.
But at the same time, it even also throws further back than that because it feels very Morlocky, right? It just feels like it's H.G. Wells, the origins of science fiction. It has its roots so deep. Yeah,
it's social commentary, and it's a B movie. And like you said, it's elevated. Like Ridley Scott talked about Alien. He said, look, this is just a B movie, but us working together, the people who were involved in producing this and making it they're what elevated it to something that stayed. I mean, imagine Alien without the lead designers. And I obviously remember H.R. Geiger, whatever, but there was also the guy that was, I forget his name right now, but he was the opposite of Geiger. He was very obsessively orderly, and he couldn't really, the part of why Geiger got the job was because he was designing things that were a little too right angle, a little too futuristic, a little too clean looking. Right. And then they ended up finding Geiger, and they're like, man, this guy, that works.
We want this guy's ribs and dicks all over the place.
Right. But the guy who created the Sulaco and, created these interiors and everything that they used to do the art direction, he was as much a part of it. You remember Geiger because that's the alien, that's the creature. Right. And, you typically when you think of design outside of working in that industry, you're just like, somebody designed that monster. And then they shot it on a real spaceship, a real planet. Like there's just that sense of, Jurassic Park. They just shot dinosaurs and, dinosaurs are, I don't know. The dinosaurs aren't real, but they shot real dinosaurs.
It is almost like a thankless job, right? Where almost the best thing that they could do is have it fade completely into the background and not be noticed.
Well, yeah. And that is one of the day jobs I have doing VFX is like one of the jobs I got to do that I was really proud to get to be involved with was a docuseries called Philly DA that focuses on Larry Krasner, who I got to meet. It was him and his wife at the release of that and talked to him for a little while. First thing he said to me was, you're an asshole. Look how tall you are. Because we were taking, to be fair, we were taking a photo together, and I am a lot bigger than him. He's a tiny little.
You're a tall guy.
I'm a tall guy, and he's just another short guy. And his wife is very nice. Was ex-judge Jill. That's all the name dropping I'll do today. So I met them. They're also everybody's favorite, Larry Krasner. Nothing will endear me more to Philadelphians. I really like him. But anyway, politics aside, I worked on Philly DA, which is a fantastic docuseries if anybody hasn't seen it. Again, connections to The Wire. It feels like, what if you really just shot something that felt like it was the loam or the inspiration for something like The Wire. Mm-hmm. You get to see the inner workings and where the sausage is made, the guts of Philadelphia's local government and the bureaucracy and the pains of all of that. And I've got a credit on there. It's just VFX. It's just Harvey and I doing VFX. Mm-hmm. For it. And it's like, well, what? It's a docuseries. Well, why would you have VFX? There's no dragons. It's like, well, there are shots where you gotta, they're like, okay, this has got to be this time, or we need the snow out of this shot, or this B-roll is damaged. It's got this problem here, or
this logo can't be here.
Right. Something as simple as that, where you have to swap something out. I don't think any of what I did, I want to point out, none of that breaks the reality of what is going on. You're still seeing as true a story as a documentary ever can be.
You didn't insert Bugs Bunny in there somewhere?
I had the head of the FOP. I put horns on him. Yeah. I added spinach in his teeth.
I thought that they would just happen to be revealed on that day.
Yeah, that was right. Yeah. I deep faked so many of those lines. No, I didn't do it. There's no deep fakes in that whatsoever. But it's one of those jobs. Like you said, when you're doing a great job in filmmaking, a lot of what that long list of credits that you see are people that are just trying to be as seamless as possible. They're trying to be as invisible as possible.
So Bonamy gets given this treatment for C.H.U.D. by story credit holder Shep Abbott. He's in a funk, and the script, he says it's in shoddy shape, but he thinks it'll make a lot of money, and he's really stung by the failure of the bell jar. Shep said in the commentary that the story we see doesn't really reflect too much of his original which featured people who were sick, not the radiation-evolved freaks that we know and love. He built the movie around the word chud after coming up with it while drunk and loving it. And then he was like, and then once I came up with it, it was really hard to actually shoehorn into the movie.
Yeah. Didn't seem that hard. He came up with 2 great anagrams. Is that right? Anagrams? That's not right. Whatever it is. Where you got
it's
letters with periods.
Right.
He came up with 2. It was cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, and the other one is something
contamination hazard
urban disposal.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And you finally, when it's revealed and your head does a full 180 of surprise.
Honestly, I feel like everybody I know who has seen that movie don't remember that, and they always say cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. And I think that says something about this. I let that say something deeper about the script and its brilliance, which is that those stories, even The Wire in its day, I'm going to keep going back to The Wire. Even The Wire in its day, the people working on The Wire were like, this is a dud. This ain't going nowhere. Throughout I believe most of the people were pretty unconvinced that it was going to be anything past the first season. And then later it was like, wow, this is lauded because of how genuine it is and how close it brings people, how far it strays away from propaganda.
Right.
And what you expect out of a cop show and how you expect to have your hand held at every second. You have to, have so many of those shows end up just being, you're being constantly, most cop shows are about 2 things. They're like, you got to love these characters because they're putting their lives on the line. And then, then you've got the other thing where they're like, they're doing a really hard job and they're trying to keep us safe. and then there are people who actually have to deal with cops all the time. And the cops in The Wire are much closer, I'll say. Although maybe I've also heard a lot of people say they're really too nice to cops in The Wire. Is that they're shown as people. And that's also great. I mean, it's also one of the great things about the stories like The Sopranos at the time that were coming out. They're shown to be people with flaws themselves. And how do those flaws, when their responsibility is to make a decision whether or not to successfully pursue or investigate a murder, or whether or not to move funding from education into the debt. Those questions are really deep and they're really annoying to have to handle. And that isn't typical entertainment. It asks a lot of the audience. And I think C.H.U.D is the same. Having it finally revealed, what is this? C.H.U.D, cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller. And then later for it to change. That's a lot to ask for an audience. It's like, I'm here for blood and guts and stuff. Like, you guys seen like Friday the 13th? Can you do that or not? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it definitely works for me. For sure, when I think of C.H.U.D, I think of the name cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. And in this movie, they're specifically like, it's not that after all.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the larger point, right? Is that we have an expectation for how things are and what they are, and then we get kicked in the ass by reality constantly.
So true. I did think Shep is a pretty funny guy. He talked about how the only 2 scenes of his that they saved were people getting attacked, and then when he went to a screening in Connecticut with some friends, he's all proud to see his credit. And then it comes up on screen and the guy behind him goes, Shepard Abbott, what the hell kind of name is that? Made me laugh. Hey, buddy, you're in Connecticut. You're going to hear names like that. Get used to it.
Nice. Shepard Abbott is definitely a very Connecticut, Is he a rich man? Is he from a man of wealth? We don't know.
He seemed like a salt of the earth type on the commentary is what I'll say.
Yeah.
As far as what drew Andrew to the script, he talked about connecting with the grounded fear of the movie despite the fantastical monster, that it was at home instead of easily avoidable places like the ocean or space, and tied to the terror that he himself felt at the increase in stories of criminals who supposedly just craved violence as opposed to economic crime. This is a quote, I tried to say that what's under the city is what we're ultimately afraid of because there's no reasoning with it. That undeniable terror that is what makes Michael Myers so effective. It's what makes C.H.U.D so effective, that there's not really anything you can do about it.
Well, commerce as the culprit that's not scary. That's just sad. I mean, right. and maybe that's part of the not the flaw or the downfall of that movie. I think that more so, one, I think it had some strong competition. It was, what was it, 82 it came out?
84 it
84?
came out. Yeah.
I remember reading that it had strong competition when it came out, though I'm loath to remember what the hell that was. So, yeah, you have limited release already because the studios aren't particularly enamored of it, and they're not going to throw their backs into they're like, oh, we're not going to, we just put this out and put it back away. And then eventually, it ended up having a second life because video started up, or a different cult following, we'll say. But yeah, that you when you say commerce is the culprit, when you say that money is the evil, as you said, or as you're quoting, what's underneath the city is scary because you can't reason with it. That's like a stressful existential kind of horror. And I think that's important. I do think that that's important that as working as a layer, but there's also an expectation in the tradition of horror that there are going to be scares and there's going to be, and that means there has to be tension. And I do think that's one thing that C.H.U.D doesn't spend a lot of time on. There are a few scenes that work tension in and they work pretty well, but overall, it feels like The Wire. It doesn't feel like you're tensely, it's all about this moment. It's like, no, there is no moment, sweetie. This is reality. And it's like, we don't really want to buy into that. And so like the ending also feels kind of like it ends up being kind of messy. It also feels like they ran out of money with the thing blowing up and them just kind of like holding each other and the credits roll.
That's it, I guess.
They're like, yeah, right. Got to end it sometime, I guess. But it doesn't really wrap up neatly or dovetail together like you just watch the end of a Seinfeld episode where you're like, oh, those are the very same pants.
That's what I like about it, though. I will talk about this when we get to the sort of conclusion of the movie, but I love that it's just like them staring at the flames, being like, okay, what the fuck now?
Right. And it's just one more problem. It's just one more day for them.
Right.
Because none of those problems are going to get solved. The biggest issue that got solved is one asshole got knocked off the board, but he'll be replaced by somebody even more brutal.
Right. Who knows the situation going in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He'll be able to play it exactly how he wants, and other people will give in. They'll be like, they even talk about it in the film. They're like, you really want to raise kids around here? Like, they're about to have a child. And you're like, yeah, that's a good question,
Yeah.
They have a certain kind of lifestyle they don't want to lose, but they also, it's a common question in Philadelphia for people who have means and they are about to have kids, and they're like, well, we do have to talk about the school system or what the plan is for that, because the city's not going to be doing us any favors on that.
For sure. Bonamy tells this story about the inception of the movie, which I've slightly condensed in an effort at brevity. I've definitely failed at making it brief, but I've made an attempt. He said, there are two facts, and this story is 3 rungs up the ladder from them. The first is that there are huge colonies of people living under the city. Not subways, there is a labyrinth of tunnels, far deeper, originally housing the city's steam tunnels. There are caves and arched ceilings. They look like medieval castle dungeons, and they all interlock under Central Park and the Bowery. And mostly during the winter months, there are people who live down there largely because it's warm.
Yeah.
The U.S. government was supposed to find a place for industry to dump its radioactive, toxic, and biological wastes, because the restrictions have forced a rebound. Industry said, okay, you're not going to let us do X, Y, and Z with this stuff. You tell us what we can do with it. So fact number 2 is that the government has been toying with the idea of storing waste in some of these underground caverns. Now, I have no proof of this. The closest we've gotten to proof is that they have lobbied for and gotten approval for transportation of nuclear waste through New York City. They also got scared while asking the Nuclear Regulatory Commission what they wore on environmental checks, and the NRC ominously warned them that they'd need protective suits to shoot in their planned locations. So he concluded by saying that they took these and mixed them up and came up with the idea that maybe people had been playing around with anything from recombinant DNA to radioactive waste, both incendiary topics at the time, and transformed into these C.H.U.D.s. And I think that this is sort of what makes it have that feeling that we're talking about, right? Is that it started from the governmental issue. That it started as a look at this overstep and the sort of waylaying this burden on the people. And then it sort of let the monsters evolve out of that, as opposed to saying like, crap, we gotta have this monster jumping out at people. How can we make it mean something? And I think that that is a slight difference, but one that makes all the difference.
I think that I love all of that. And there's two big things I think about with that. One is that it's a confluence of corruption, right? Because you have the corruption of the me 80s and which were really just getting going at that time. I assume at the time of the writing of the script, which must have been at least a year or two before. Right. And the attitudes, though, changing post-Carter, getting into the Reagan world, and people thinking that getting ahead at any cost is all, it's everything. That's my new religion. Forget about God. It's about money. Mm-hmm. And they have Reagan, who famously cut funding and put out all these people became derelict after cutting funding for psychiatric help. And people had nowhere to go, and they really didn't give a shit what happened to them. And families don't have the means to support them in most cases, or families aren't even included. The people just dumped on the street, right?
Right.
And not to say that that's all people who are unhoused, but in many cases it is. And we'll just say that's an example. And these unhoused people, they're not just going to die. They're going to go somewhere. And when they find out about, okay, well, these, as you said, the steam tunnels, I'm going to go down in the steam tunnels. I mean, I need shelter.
Right.
So they go down in the steam tunnels and they start to congregate there. And then there's word of mouth, and the underground people are like, okay, well, this is something I can live with. Right. But then the confluence happens when another person says, well, we'll just use the steam tunnels to push everything through. Don't bother looking down there. Don't bother checking what you're doing. Don't get off your ass. Just keep pushing pencils and everything should be fine. But there's the confluence, is that when it happened, they got stuck, and they never would have got caught if the damage hadn't been done in the way that it did. And that's
right.
Sort of the brilliance of it, is like turning it into a monster actually helps to put an icon on it.
Definitely. So Andrew, eager to shift the story into something that had some class to it, was his quote, brings in Parnell Hall. This next bit is again a condensation, but only slightly. He says, people say horror movies are out. Sure, if you ask someone to write a script in 10 days and hand over 18 girls and a maniac, if you call that a horror movie, then I think it's true that horror movies are on their way out. But C.H.U.D has nothing to do with that. This is political. And that's exactly it. I think that really sums up what makes this so special, is that it has the monster. It has what you're looking for in an 80s monster movie in terms of there's goop. You got some great foam latex designs, but it really is political. And I think that keeping their eye on that prize is what has helped this stand the test of time.
Yeah. And I love all that. I also love about the concept of the finding the derelict part of the city, and even more derelict part, because, what was so beautiful about anything that was shot in the 80s is that Scorsese time, like the really nice time of, like, the cars looked better and there weren't as many of them. You have these neon signs popping up, and the concrete and steel is just starting to overtake the brick, and the cobblestone is being replaced with the asphalt. In this transition, you start to see these buildings jutting up against each other, different eras of design bumping up against one another. And you get these really beautiful alleys, where we still have them in Philadelphia, in many places, in Chinatown and Center City is one of my favorite things. You walk around, you just see these nasty alleys. and they're lit like they're a dressed set many times, because they don't want to put too many lights there, but they don't want to let it get so dark that it's dangerous, right?
Right.
But you have these pockets of darkness, so you have this great contrast. So it feels both real and organized, it feels intentional as well. And then you go then you go below that into the underground, and, the psychology, I don't know how I could say what the psychology is behind, but, we all have this fear, this understanding of fear of derelict buildings, ruins, old homes, it's haunted, right?
Right.
And maybe that has something to do with survival, knowing like there are certain places that are corrupted, and then maybe it's just they've got mold. Maybe they've just got, they're unsafe to walk on, or there's
that's enough.
Yeah. It's, and you need to explain it. And then through the oral traditions, you start to concoct things like, don't go there, there's ghosts. I don't want to explain mold to you because you don't understand. You're not going to understand it. I don't really understand it, but I'm going to say there's ghosts. You're afraid of ghosts? Then no, there's ghosts.
And one day this ghost will be used in antibiotics.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We use ghost technology to save you. It's called buicillin. I just came up with that.
Sulk, eat your damn heart out.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that they were able to crash so much of that together. And I also love that they maintain the neighborhood feel where different characters are bumping into one another, not necessarily connected by a scene, you know?
Yeah.
And
there's a part where I literally wrote, the plots are converging, and it just feels so natural.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. The plots, they totally converge. Characters just start to meet each other or deal with each other.
Right.
And another thing I love about what makes that so watchable for me is that it's got that Mike Leigh kind of quality where you're like, I don't even really care about plot or where this is going. It's just a life. It's just people living their lives. But they're people I believe are real. John Hurd feels like he's a real guy. He's both, got a point and maybe just a bit of an asshole at the same time.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't feel like a polished movie character.
No.
At all.
His imperfections, all of their imperfections are what helped to sell it. I will say that, and I don't think he's overall a bad actor. And I think he was one of the co-producers or co-writers as the lead who played Bosch.
Oh, Chris Curry, yes.
Chris Curry.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned that, and the funny part about all of Andrew's sort of shit-talking the original script is that in the commentary, which did feature basically the whole gang, Daniel Stern and Chris Curry were quite insistent that the script that they got was trash, and they had to rewrite it again themselves, basically.
I believe that.
Yeah.
But I also think that Chris Curry's performance is terrible.
Yeah, he's wooden in this.
He's very wooden, and it's not necessarily always the performer's fault. The conditions are going to be what they are, but it clashes a lot with when Daniel Stern's on screen with him, and Daniel Stern is carrying them both and the scene on his back with his performance.
Well, him and Hurd are both very theatrical as well. They're both very big, and I feel like even in the moments where he's not, maybe Wooden was a little harsh, but where he's more reserved, I think it does clash with that bombast that the other two are bringing.
Wooden is fair. And I'm blanking on her name, who is the female lead who is also from Brazil.
Kim Greist.
Yeah.
Grist? However you say that.
Oh, I remember her name. It's Kim Greist.
That's right.
Some people say Grist. I loved
I've
her
heard it both ways.
And I loved her. I loved her in Brazil was one of my favorite movies as a kid. That I was a big Terry Gilliam fan as a kid. And that movie just sort of blew up my brain. And I think that she's another great tone in the performance canvas. She's a lot more subtle, but she offsets John Hurd's bombastic energy by just sort of, it's really more like the characters are working as they should.
Right. She feels like a calming presence.
She's trying to bring him down. That feels like two people that live together. It feels like two people are trying to make it work with one another. One maybe doing a little more heavy lifting than the other. And I can relate. I don't know about anybody else. I had to relate to that too, where sometimes I'm like, I was just yelling. Why was I yelling? I mean, I wasn't yelling at anybody. I'm just mad about something. And my wife would be like, yeah, no, you seem a little hungry or something. It makes those two characters feel more genuine when their performances complement each other in a believable way.
Definitely. So yes, as we say, Chris Curry playing Police Captain Bosch. We have Daniel Stern playing AJ, the Reverend Shepherd. They are joined by John Hurd as George Cooper. Stern and Hurd are not really in any scenes together in Home Alone, so they probably didn't talk about Chud much on set, but I can see them like getting Vietnam-style flashbacks when they lock eyes at the premiere.
Chud,
the heat wave. The heat wave in New York.
I looked in his eyes and he knew. Chud. I mean, that was Daniel Stern's wife was in the opening scene as well, played Bosch's wife. Yeah, they may have never met on set. I may never have talked about it again. I mean, it's also one of maybe 30 movies that between the two of them that they had been in or projects that they had been in since that time between commercials and TV series. I mean, how many episodes did Daniel Stern do VO for Wonder Years before he even Well, that was before. Was that before or was that after?
I don't know. I'm so bad with years.
It might have been late 80s and then it went into, I don't know.
Look, man, you don't star in C.H.U.D without it being on the forefront of your mind at all times.
That's right. That's right. Stardust Memories. There was Daniel Stern, John Hurd. Did they ever talk in Home Alone 2, their characters? I don't think they did.
I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen Home Alone 2. I watched Home Alone 1 last Christmas, so I was fresh. I was like, they definitely don't interact in that movie, but yeah. Maybe in 2. Hey, listeners out there, let us know. Do John Hurd and Daniel Stern interact in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York?
Use the phone number on the screen.
Yeah,
1-800 do C.H.U.D now.
We await your call.
What the C.H.U.D?
Perfect.
Yeah.
We also have Sam McMurray as Officer Crespi. This is a big time that guy character actor. He's laughing it up at everything. Every time someone's like, I need help, he's like, yeah, right. Get bent.
Yeah, he's... you're talking about the guy, I don't remember. You're talking about the guy from the Tracy Ullman show and
yes.
Yeah. No, he's fantastic. He played the Dr. Kennedy in The Sopranos. Always a great character. Freaks and Geeks. He played what's his name's dad. He's cheating.
Oh yeah.
The dentist.
Fuck. Yeah. Oh, he's so funny. He's great. I always like to see him pop up. Yeah.
Incredible presence. Great face. Just always when you see him, you're like, and I like this. He's like he's like a younger Clue Gallagher type where you're like, I just know I'm gonna get something out of this scene.
Especially, I think it's emblematic of the movie that he is in such a small role and that it doesn't feel like a small role because of who they filled it with.
Next to him was a guy, and I'm not going to know I know his name. I'm really great at faces and I'm terrible at names, which is really, it's like a weird kind of Twilight Zone curse sometimes. like people see the flash of recognition on my face and I'm like, I don't know what your name is.
I still need you to say your name again.
I just need to carry a pad around and write people's names down. Like if I see it written down, I'll be like, that's their name.
It just turns into a list of all names.
Yeah, and I have no idea what they attach to. And it really doesn't matter because it's just about that moment. Seeing, I can see the word just like I can see their faces. So, but that actor who's opposite him, the guy we're just talking about, again, I just already forgot his name. Tracy Ullman guy.
Sam McMurray.
Let me write that down. I'm exciting podcast where I write people's names.
Let me just draw a quick picture of Sam McMurray and write his name next to it.
I'm going somewhere with this. You guys just wait. No, the guy opposite him was also, I always remember him from X-Files. He was in one of the best episodes called Pusher, where he was something Grist. It wasn't Grist because we just talked about Grist.
It
was Kim Grist. But it was Frank. It was Frank something. And because I remember the guy saying it's a great name. And then he's the guy he goes on the phone with, and Pusher basically gives that guy a heart attack over the phone.
That's right. Pusher, that's one of the Vince Gilligan ones, I think.
Yeah, it's one of the best episodes.
Yeah. Everyone who's in this movie in every role is really making the most out of it, I feel like. There's no one who's just like, we just need filler. We need someone in this role, so just pull someone out the street. Everyone feels intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. Tons of talent and experience in that movie. And just like energy that's there. I mean, it's there and it's not there. There's sometimes where you're like, yeah, I don't recognize this person. And that's probably because they didn't need to be in another movie.
Yeah.
And there's other times where you're like, that guy, yeah, that's just that guy. Like, I know that guy.
It's Sam McMurray.
I know that guy.
As I mentioned, this was filmed during a heat wave. It's exacerbated by the humid basements and sub-basements that they're shooting in. During an early scene in the commentary, Cheek himself says, "We finished filming, came up into 100-degree heat on the street, and it felt like spring." So, unpleasant shooting conditions. With that said, he loved the cast and vibe on set. He said that he felt like it was really going to have the art spirit of the Lower East Side and function as a time capsule of New York, which I think, mission accomplished.
That's a real thing. I mean, shooting conditions, when we were about to start shooting Pop, I was hot off of finishing Guard Dog and doing all the merch and all the running around with that. And then I was like, I just want to keep the momentum up. I want to keep the energy up. Let's get Pop. I had already written a draft of it and I had already shot a previs for it. And I found the house and my friend was like about to move in. I was like, let's take a look and we'll do a scout. I went with the DP and the producer and the AD, Menzak, who I didn't mention, and the producer, Charles Smith. And it was so hot. It was just so hot. It was disgusting. And we kept having to walk outside because it's like, okay, there's not going to be any air conditioning running, and we got sound running. It's going to be a mess. There's going to be 25 people in here in a room at any given time. You've got some of these lights are going to be hot. People are going to be hot because they're working hard and can't have fans running. Your actor's makeup's going to get screwed up constantly, and all this stuff. It slows people down. It makes your grip slippery when you're trying to carry heavy equipment around a corner and not damage somebody's wall. So we ended up pushing it, and then it got pushed again, and it got just to the really nice temperature. So when we shot it, everybody's just wearing a long sleeve shirt and everything's fine.
Wow.
And it's crazy how just like fortuitous that is and how brutal it would have been if we didn't do it that way. I've been on shoots. I did one of the grip jobs where I met Devin, who shot this, was for a movie in Philly called Concrete Cowboy. And I did one day as like a, genie, and just got up at the crack of dawn, went out to the stalls where they shot the night before, and it had rained, and we pulled hundreds of feet of cable out of these stalls that were, just rained on. So it's just mucked and dried. And then it's July. And it just smelled terrible.
Oh, man.
And it was burning hot by 9:30. And we were there till sundown. It was to set up for all day, just to set up for a sunset and a night shoot. So we could set up this giant balloon 4K on a lift. And then I remember I was getting pizza next to that kid who was in it. Who's the kid? Caleb McLaughlin. Who he's a grown guy now, and I don't want to be whatever, but like he was like the cutest kid I've ever seen in my life. Man. He just bounced when he walked. What a sweet kid. And I got some pizza, and then the union guy was like, yeah, don't let him see that you got pizza. I was like, man, I just worked for 12 hours straight. I don't have a calorie left in my body. I don't care what anybody says. Like, people could be throwing wrenches at my head right now. I'd still eat this pizza and I get out of my face.
Yeah. That's so funny. They're very similar to this, where they're talking about how like they're waiting to shoot and they had to like move stuff around the corner. And so it's like, they're like, all right, sit in the car for 4 hours while we reset the car that has to come around the corner. And he's like, I have to pee. And they're like, do not move.
Yeah.
You have to be here.
Yeah,
and then he wound up like having to run to the gas station because he was like, I'm gonna piss in this car if I have to sit here. So
that's a common problem with people that you as a producer must remember that people have bodies and they do all the things your body does, and you've got to. We had a thing with Guard Dog where it was June when we were shooting and it was very hot. It was weird light because of the smoke, not the smoke, the weird kind of. The forest fire. Well, it was smoke, from the forest fires in Canada. Everybody's like, look at the sun. It's so strange. I had this plan in my head, and I didn't have a producer and an AD for that shoot. I had this plan in my head because the writer really wanted to have their dog be the dog in the movie Guard Dog. And their dog, Artie, I love Artie, but Artie is the worst behaved dog on the planet. And I was like, okay, so look, we're just going to rewrite this around Artie being really yippy and bouncing off the walls. And like, is a little dog, kind of looks like a Chihuahua, is not a Chihuahua. And it bounces off this glass, and that's a lot of the shots we're going to get. But his energy is only going to last so long, so we need to make sure that our crew doesn't keep coming in and out of this house before we get the shot. We're gonna set up on the side of the house. We're gonna try to keep everybody as quiet as possible, and then we're gonna set up the camera. And meanwhile, you've got Artie upstairs, and you're keeping him nice and calm. And then he's gonna come downstairs. We're gonna shoot these corners of him coming downstairs, and then we're gonna shoot him from outside. And then none of that happened. I mean, none of that. That was my plan. And as second anybody showed up, first of all, people kept showing up in waves because it's like a lot of people are unpaid or they're paid lower than their normal rate. And they're doing favors. And the last thing you can say to somebody who's you're doing you a favor is like, no, you can't go to the bathroom until we're done setting up the camera. And I'm sorry it took 2 hours, but that's how long it takes. Every single person who showed up on that set, the second they landed was like, I need to use your bathroom really bad. I was like, you can't go. Can we figure out a way? I guess we can't. Just be really quiet. And then before you know it, it's a party inside the house because one is meeting the one and there's a line for the bed and they're like, yeah, what do you think about that? Yeah. Oh yeah. I was working on that too. And then Matt would come down and say, like, are we shooting? And he's got the dog in his arms like, It's all gone. All the magic of my plan, my brilliant plan, is out the window.
Wow.
Instantly. And I swear that dog had no energy. I was jumping and I'm barking at it and screaming in front of the whole crew. Like, come on, let's go. Jump up in the net. He's looking at me like, cock his head like, what do you think I'm going to do?
Everyone else is like, I don't know what took you so long. This was could have been happening.
We spliced the shit out of that movie. It was a rough one to shoot, and it needed a director and an AD, and they just happened to run over in the post-production for this series we all were working on called Albie's Elevator, which I was fortunate enough to do a little bit of VFX, and I did a ton of soundtrack work for. I ended up doing like 70 musical pieces for that. And then we shot Guard Dog. What a time.
Sounds like it.
And then as a freelancer, you know the next thing that happened? Nothing for months.
You say, surely this will snowball into a ton.
No. Barely a call. And then you're like, just, okay, get that money to me, please. I want to make another horror movie.
So they didn't film entirely on location, though, and the production designer William Billowit, also known for Creepshow, he worked on the one with Stephen King where the moss takes over everything. I think Green Problem,
yeah.
It's called something like that. He talked in the special features about how he built a Y-shaped tunnel because it enabled a variety of camera angles that could make it look much larger. So, good tip for anyone looking to build a tunnel set.
Yep.
Make it in the shape of a Y.
Well, you could shoot it from several different angles and play it off of itself and light it in such a way that you can make the tunnel look like it's connecting from one of the connectors and one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It becomes a whole series of tunnels,
right.
A system. He also said, I remember being dirty a lot. That much comes across on screen, pal.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody's filthy. That's great. It just adds to the grime. It with the heat too. You can see it like so many of those scenes where you're like, so John Hurd's just going to like sweat through that shirt, huh?
Oh, yeah.
That's just what it's going to be on screen.
That's right.
And that was probably the freshest shirt they had on set.
The effects are also fun. You have John Caglione on creatures and Ed French on the victims/aftermath effects. Caglione is an icon. He did the makeup for Ledger's Joker, the Dick Tracy movie, Manhunter. Even his early stuff is like, did the Coneheads as he joined SNL for its second season, makeup effects assistant for Friday the 13th Part 2, special makeup effects for Basket Case. Like, this dude has just been working on icons of horror from the word go.
Yeah, incredible effects. I'm terrible in that world. It's one of my weaknesses. And I work so much in digital effects. It's really weird because I constantly am just trying to talk people out of doing digital effects at all.
Right.
I'm just like, nah, just try to figure out how to cleverly shoot it or try to figure out how to do it practically as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Sells it way better than you'll ever sell it with digital.
That's right.
Almost every case.
And Ed French is no slouch either, with work on The Stuff, Blood Rage, Vampire's Kiss, and Terminator 2 under his belt. So you do have some definite powerful effects work happening. The Chuds themselves cost about 1/10 of their budget, but Caglione talked about how much input Bonamy was giving. So no surprise that they had the money here. John was more into the mutated humans look, but Andrew kept pushing him more and more monstrous. And there was a funny quote where he said, "You have to be a facilitator. I see myself as an artist, but you also got to make them happy." You know, again, that freelance attitude that, like, you know, it
Absolutely.
is ultimately a job, but you want to try and express yourself where you're able to.
I think that the bigger thing, even when you're at the top, in the case of the shorts that I got to do, especially with Pop, I wrote it, I produced it, I directed it, and I did all of this stuff for the back, you know, on the back end with the posts, a lot of it, editing and VFX and music. It's still a collaborative effort, no matter how much you want to have your specific vision pushed on somebody. When you go into that with the expectation, like, this is how it's going to look and this is going to be, it's, who's the guy that just passed, the Exorcist, New York.
Friedkin?
Director. Yeah, William Friedkin.
The Freak. Billy the Freak.
He used to say, well, it's, in my mind's eye, it's perfect. Exactly how I want it to be.
Right.
And then when I get on set, it's, you know, we try to get as close to it. It'll never be as good. It'll never be as good. Also, one of my favorite quotes was somebody asking him about, I'll just talk about him for a second. I loved when he talked about cruising. Somebody in an interview brought up.
What a movie.
Who's the lead in that? Oh my God.
Pacino.
Al Pacino. So somebody in the interview was asking William Friedkin, well, Al Pacino said that at the end of the movie, and William Friedkin shut him down and said, I just want to say, I don't give a flying fuck through a rolling donut what Al Pacino says about anything. Does that answer your question? I want to listen to this guy talk for hours.
Oh my God. Friedkin is amazing. His audiobook, which he does narrate himself, is incredible. It is one of the best autobiographies that I have ever encountered. It's just phenomenal. Highly recommended. His chapters on cruising in particular are outrageous and insane and fucking incredible. But truly the whole thing is great. He's also just an amazing director. Bug, totally underrated. Yeah. What a fucking movie. It's crazy to me that don't get me wrong, I love The Exorcist. In my opinion, that's like his third best movie. Maybe.
What would you say is bestest?
I love To Live and Die in L.A. That is definitely his number one, in my opinion.
I think I'm pretty basic with that. I think it's for him. It's The Exorcist. The Exorcist just is something magical happened with that many, many, many times during shooting and during post. They put something together that really had no business existing. Mm-hmm. It's already a impossible mission no one asked for when you're like, okay, let's go after the Catholic Church. let's take a hard shot at them, but it's a horror movie, which is already kind of in the schlock zone. That's the expectation that some people are going to have. You're already coming from so deep in a hole of what people's expectations are going to be. Mm-hmm. And then for them to pull something out that was that evocative and that makes you think and also scares the crap out of you. I mean, as a kid growing up as a Catholic, even when I finally saw that as a teenager, I was not a Catholic anymore, I'll say.
Right.
But there was a part of me that was close enough to having been a Catholic that still felt like, am I supposed to watch this? This feels forbidden, even now. And that was, 2000, late 90s, something like that. Not 1970, where it's like people watching that, throwing up and crossing themselves.
We had built the barrier a little more at that point.
Right. But I feel like those movies like that and Alien paved the way for movies like C.H.U.D to feel like they could exist in that that genre. And that's another thing I love about horror is that it's not so compressed. It feels like people are really interested in forgiving. The culture around horror is so game for almost anything. Definitely. There's not a lot of judgment. There's not a lot of expectation or pretense that you've got to handle. There's not a lot of does it do this? Does it do that? It can be the worst of the worst. And a lot of horror fans are like, I'm going to watch that because it's horror. I don't care.
I think that's absolutely true. I think there's also a really interesting built-in suspension of disbelief where a lot of people come in saying, okay, I'm willing to accept whatever is about to happen. It might be crazy. It might be unrealistic, but that's sort of the baseline that I'm setting for myself.
They cheer it on naturally. I mean, maybe this is an American thing. I don't know about a lot of other cultures, but I find that in theater, you find when there's a great scare, you get a few chuckles after it happens where people are like, yeah, good for you.
They got me. They got me again, baby.
They got me. And it's not like I can't, when you sneak around a corner and you spook somebody and you're like, gotcha. And it's like, I can't believe you did that to me. I can't believe you would do that. I don't like that. But when you're in that seat with that expectation, you're like, man, he got me. You got to hand it to him. Exactly.
I signed up to take the ride. Also, now that I had a little bit of time to think about it, I'm going to say top 5. Number 1, To Live and Die in L.A. Number 2, Sorcerer.
Nice.
Number 3, The Exorcist. Number 4, Cruising. Number 5, The French Connection. So that's my top 5.
Cruising is pretty intense, man. That movie's it's just got that vibe.
Oh man, it really, it's intense is I think the exact right word for it. It's fucking crazy. And I watched it after I had listened to the autobiography, so I'd sort of been primed to have his interpretation in mind of the possibility that Pacino is the killer.
Yeah.
It was just really, it was all working for me. Really great movie.
I went in cold on Cruising and it did not disappoint.
The actors in the C.H.U.D costumes had to sit in these director chairs with an oxygen mask when they weren't on screen because they couldn't breathe, much less see in those masks. They had a reflective layer on the eyes. It took all day. And then you barely even see them, which is very funny.
Yep.
They said on the commentary, it makes you want to do theater.
It does. It's the right thing for the film to show them less because you see too much of that and you've lost. And that's one of the major disciplines of any horror that tries to have any scare factor at all. You know, there's different kinds. You know, sometimes you're just going for camp and you just want it to be silly and you're going to see the monster bouncing around the hills in broad daylight. And it's like, okay, this is fun. I get to see that neat costume. And then there's other cases where you are genuinely trying to go for a scare and you're pitted against the fact that you're like, okay, well, I spent all this money on this thing. I shot it with all this film and now I've got it. I want to show it. And it'd be like, you can't. You've got to cut it. You got to cut it as down to the bone, as little as people will tolerate because that's just the right amount. But I'll also say we did Guard Dog and my best friend Kent, genius that he is, put the costume of the slime monster together by himself, carved every droop on it. It was designed for somebody who's a little, my height, 6'4". So it's a giant thing with these I don't know, hundreds of droops, big drips all over the place, little drips. And then
it's slimy as hell looking.
It's slimy as hell. And then we covered it in slime. He put the cup lights together. There was a couple little things that I helped him with on design ideas, but he manufactured it all by himself. And then we wore it on the day. We had the actor wear it on the day. It was a brilliant actor, Jim Jackson, who is also like studied theater in Russia. And he's like doing this non-speaking role costume thing. And he was great. And then I had to put it on for Blobfest in July because they were like, if you're going to come, you got to bring that thing. And then you're going to like take photos with people outside. So I marched out there with this thing and the feet are like full of cat litter to give it this certain like look to it. And it's just foam. It's spandex with foam and glued to it, thick layers of foam glued to it, and then covered in Flex Seal, and then covered in thick layers of pink latex paint. And it covers your whole head, and there's a there's a small mouth hole that you can't really see out of. The eyes are glow lights, so you can't see through them. And I had to I stood in that thing for over an hour just talking to people and like taking people just kept coming up and hugging me. I couldn't see a thing.
Oh my God.
I'm saying random stuff. I ended up on the news. Somebody put the microphone in my mouth and I started just talking gibberish. And Matt Schmidt, who wrote the thing and started it, was like, talk about the movie. And I was like, I was talking about slime people and their rights. And like how they've been downtrodden for too long, and that's why I'm here. And it's like, talk about the movie, sell the shirt. I'm like, I can't even remember my name. I think it's something about a dog. I don't know why there's a slime monster or something.
I'm melting in here.
Oh, I was dying in that thing. I was loopy by the end.
Sure.
But it's a great feeling to get out of those costumes. Boy, that's a special feeling.
Cheek also said about the slimy look of the movie, between us and Ghostbusters, we sold out all the KY jelly in New York City.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the tough thing that it opened against is Ghostbusters coming out.
Oh yeah, that would eat its lunch.
Yeah.
I had the foresight to have our set deck guy on the day of shooting Guard Dog be Slime Wrangler as well. So he just mixed different levels of viscosity of buckets of the slime. Tons of Elmer's glue and borax and this conditioner stuff, cellulose and stuff, and mixed with pink, red and white dye, and just pouring it all over poor Jim, who's already like covered in stuff, just covering him in slime.
You need your touch up, Jim.
Ruining Kent's costume, which Kent also, I gave it back to him, and he just, something about that guy, he's also an animator, brilliant animator, and he just loves tedium. I can't stand it, and so we work well together in that regard. But he got all of that hardened slime goop off of because he can't leave it on because it molds.
Sure.
And he got it all off.
Wow. That's remarkable.
I don't know how. I mean, I guess I do.
You also have Martin Cooper doing the score, which I really like. It's this kind of strange score, but it really fits the tone of the movie, I feel like.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that style of music. The 80s coming out of the 70s, independent composers who have to figure out how to make something feel theatrical but they have the budget for one keyboard.
Right.
And the tape machine in their bedroom. It's somewhere between Giallo and Carpenter for that soundtrack. It gets epic. It also has the rock and drum machine every once in a while, and the bells, the synth bells and stuff, all iconic stuff.
Definitely. The movie took $1.3 million to make, $2 million technically with their deferred payment that they never actually got. John Hurt got $110K, Stern and Curry got $8,000, which was scale. Cheek and Abbott got nothing at all. The movie made a little under $5 million, though, but really, as we sort of alluded to earlier, it was a cult hit on the home video market, baby, and has become one of horror's most iconic names. It was in Tony Hawk Underground. Big featured moment in Us. The Criterion Channel did an April Fool's joke with it. It's just a classic, folks.
Yeah, Criterion, get real. Just put it out.
They should.
It's brilliant. It's got enough going for it. It really deserves it. I hope that, I mean, you're talking about the commentary and stuff, and a lot of those people, even, smaller roles like John Goodman, he's getting on in years, and he was like a baby in that.
Mm-hmm. It
would be great for anybody who's still around to make an appearance at the Mahoning. We have the Mahoning Drive-In in Pennsylvania.
Right.
It's one of my, that's my church now. I love that place so much. And they did this incredible C.H.U.D night where they had two guys dressed up as C.H.U.Ds. And a whole sewer, street scene set with gas coming out of the sewer and stuff.
That rocks.
My wife Sarah and I took photos, and I love that place, and they do such a great job. And it's a place that honors a movie like C.H.U.D.
Hell yeah!
And it takes the fact that they can sell out a C.H.U.D night. I mean, that's incredible.
Love it. Big shout out to Mahoning. Saw a really awesome David Lynch festival there.
Yeah,
that was really, really sick.
Yeah.
So let's get into the actual plot of the movie. It's this quiet New York street that's instantly transportive, feels like After Hours or Eyes Wide Shut. It's this sort of surreal calm before the storm. But I also really appreciate that they don't waste any time in shattering it, because she pauses by that steaming sewer grate, suddenly gets just yanked in along with her dog by this freaking nasty arm. All that's left is her shoe and the title card. C.H.U.D. What a fucking incredible opening.
It is, except that title card is terrible. I mean, the graphic itself is great, but the way that it's animated in is just so it's some sloppy work, man. Even back then, I know exactly what they did. And they're just like, that was an afternoon that some guy was like smoking too much weed, was like got paid 2 days to work, did it in like about 3 hours.
He said, "Oh, I was supposed to be doing this for 2 days."
Yeah,
fuck.
I work with guys like that sometimes. I know exactly what that looks like.
A street sweeper coming by the next morning sucks the shoe under. Just another piece of trash now, which I feel like is very thematically relevant in terms of really sort of establishing the perspective of your Joe on the street from the bureaucracy's perspective, right? That we are just something to be swept up and get caught up in this machine.
Yeah, I love it.
We also see some transient folks looking weary as hell. The man settling in behind the fire hydrant is in fact director Doug Cheek. And someone is watching them through a camera, and it's George Cooper being called by Derek, who warns them that they have a deadline of Friday for a huge follow-up article that they're working on regarding some of the community of unhoused people who've gone underground. And this is done through a cutesy repartee that they have with the answering machine intermediary, but ultimately Derek can't write the story until he has the pictures. This is a fun opening for John Hurt's character, George. I think that it is kind of interesting, especially in the dynamic it sets up that yes, he is funny, and yes, he is charming here. And then it's balanced with, as his girlfriend Lauren comes in, we do see this sort of defensively brusque cynic that he is as well, right? It honestly seems like he might be the kind of guy who's exhausting to be around if he were real. But it manifests in sort of solipsistically leaving all of his girlfriend's stuff in the basement during their recent unpacking. Someone who has put up so many barriers because they're afraid of the world and how bitter it's made them that it sort of has put blinders on them as well.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I love that the repartee, even in that goofy repartee, it's great writing. You have a way to compellingly establish both character and do a little bit of exposition, also give a little bit of flavor of the area and what's going on in this world. Not everybody lives in New York. Not everybody knows what goes on with deadlines with copywriters or with journalists and photojournalists. And it also is just going back to that Wire thing. It's just people who do the research and they know, or they just happen to write characters that they know.
Right.
And they're like, this is a conversation that we would have. And here it is presented in a very efficient way. And it's great.
Absolutely. So Lauren has to go get her jewelry down there, and she meets her neighbor on the way down. There's some strange noises coming from a sewer grate. She kind of just leaves without another thought, though. When she finds her case, she says, I'm not dealing with whatever that is. The neighbor, though, has left the building, and she's terrified to find a bloody hole in the ground after a bunch of boxes seemingly explode. This was a real hole in the street that they found, and they just put some boxes over it and had Billowit stand behind them and toss them. That's what we call making the most of your budget, folks. What do you need a fancy box exploding mechanism for? I got 2 of them right here at the end of my dang arms.
Yeah.
Ed Jones, delightful character actor, is playing the police chief here. Less delightful, and to Lieutenant Bosch's frustration, is the fact that he's suppressing news of a rash of disappearances. These police are up to no good.
And, Bosch pays for it. It's also like, again, it shows that the same thing that The Wire does, where it's like, we want to look at cops as this unified front, that they're all the same, that they all think the same, and they walk in lockstep. But in this case, it's like one person's attitude is damaging another person's life, and within their own unit.
Definitely.
Local.
I also love, as I'll sort of talk about, there is some sort of gesture towards giving him something for participating in the cover-up, in that he gets a promotion. But when it does hit close to home, and they basically just go like, sorry, Charlie, like them's the fucking breaks. It really, I think, makes it clear to him where he actually stands in relation to the bigwigs versus how quickly one might become CHUD status.
Yeah. You buy into the system and you sell yourself little by little, and you know what your reasons are for when you're doing it. You make your excuses for why it's okay for you to do it. Mm-hmm. But then, when the short end of the stick finally comes up for you, when your turn finally comes, that karma kicks you in the ass, and you're like, that's the thing that changes you. Your radicalizing moment. And that's when he starts down his journey, right?
Right. George, meanwhile, is at a photo shoot with Lauren and blows up in frustration, feeling like he's trapped by this bullshit. He says, I'm upset because these people are using your body and draping it with the carcass of some helpless little field mouse to sell some worthless perfume that probably smells like sheep piss. What are you shushing me for? They know it, they made it, they can smell, and they know what's in it, and they know what it takes to sell it.
Yeah, great rant, great delivery. You delivered it just as well as he did.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've always said I'm a real John Hurd type.
I've heard that around town. He's the John Hurd of his day.
Right. Just the acting part, though, not the notoriously short-tempered part.
Yeah. Yeah. He is a brilliant actor. Absolutely.
Funny enough, the ad people in the background wound up getting married after meeting here. It's Patricia Richardson and Ray Baker.
Aww.
Lauren calms him down, though, and he goes to check the messages while she gets her makeup touched up. And the first message is that Derek said fuck it and wrote the copy without George. They'll fudge it after the photos. The second is a doctor's office following up with Lauren. But the final one is Mrs. Monroe, the quote-unquote bag lady we saw, who was picked up by cops after she tried to steal a gun, and now she's looking for help. And she was one of George's photo subjects that they've been looking for, so he sprints out.
I love that. I mean, we glazed over a little bit before the photo shoot where she's getting ready and she's putting makeup on her ass, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I've got a pimple. It's like, you put a makeup on your ass. It's like, that's where the pimple is. And they have this great married couple repartee of, well, what are you going to be wearing in this? And she's like, perfume. And that's it. This whole, a way to make characters compelling and a way to make characters feel vibrant and alive while you're still just talking.
Right. Absolutely. Down at a soup kitchen that they actually built into a half-collapsed church in New Jersey, Daniel Stern's Reverend A.J. Shepard butts heads with Harry Bosch, clearly not the first time, but also, and this isn't something that clicked for me at first, when he calls him Lieutenant, Bosch is like, it's Captain Bosch. This is his promotion that he got to keep quiet about the cover-up.
Yeah.
But it's not sitting right with him. And Bosch is here to check in about Shepard's report that many of his, quote, family, his regulars, are going missing. The underground dwellers, about 12 of them across 2 weeks. Only Val over there is left. And this fucking guy, 1,000-yard stare, troubled to say the least.
Yeah. Val he's another character actor, but he has that moment. Gogh and Magog, they will shut the sky.
Yeah, not really any information. He kind of just riffs off the Book of Revelations.
Yeah.
But we see that the Undergrounders are all looking for weapons as he slams down a damn knife that vibrates tensely in the table. It is something to behold.
Everybody in this movie is like an advertisement for acting classes back in the 70s. They're all making their acting coaches and teachers proud, instructors.
That's right. A cop tails George and Mrs. Monroe into the subway tunnels, though he refuses to enter the actual underground at the smell. Forget it, Bosch, I lost them. Very funny moment. Just a good delivery. It's all working. John Hurt joked in the commentary, from this point on, nobody is acting.
Oh, yeah.
They did all say it was miserable. They were covered in black soot at the end of the day. It was all in their sinuses and lungs. Hot as Hades down there. Just a bad time.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a Philadelphia-based actor who ended up down there. The guy who is also a journalist, a freelance journalist. He's haunting. I know he's from Philadelphia, though. I actually remember looking it up the first time I saw it because I'm like, that guy sounds like he's from Philadelphia. And I'm like, it was. Accent hasn't changed that much.
That's right.
And he actually did a movie that was way worse than that. The Abyss. He was a part of that crew.
Oh, wow.
Where they got damned by that,
Oh, man.
that next movie. I think he was one of the people that actually was like, I'm not doing half of what this guy says because I'm just not.
Because he's deranged.
Yeah, this is stupid and nothing's worth it. And nobody talks about being in that movie. You probably look back at being in those sewers as a beautiful dream.
That's right. It is quite the trek underground. I do like this set location. They point out the stalactites that are real under the Brooklyn Bridge on the Manhattan side from generations of like road salt and that sort of thing.
And those are them?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's cool. There, Victor, Hugo, and Mrs. M live insulated against the world. I wasn't sure if they were making a Victor Hugo reference there. These are Les Miserables, perhaps?
I didn't think of that either. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, they're their own Les Mis under the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Victor has been looking for a gun to shoot the, quote, ugly fuckers who might come around. He's sick, explains Mrs. M. Just look at this giant-ass leg wound. And George takes a look, and it is indeed a giant-ass leg wound.
Yeah, the guy who played Victor was the Greek in The Wire.
Good effect. It looks fucking gross. It, like, goes down to the bone, it seems like. Really nasty stuff.
Weird performance there, too, when they reveal it, and it's supposed to be really shocking, and then they hang on his face for way too long, and in the cut, and he's just sort of gnashing his mouth silently. And, you know, that...
I mean, he's turning into a chud, man.
That's presumably what a person would do if that happened. However,
Yeah.
they should have cut earlier. It just looked weird. It gets sort of like that awkward kind of like silent moment where it's the moment has passed and they haven't cut yet. Yeah.
They said, we need to be exactly this length. We cannot trim any more seconds.
Oh, yes. No. I got that sense. I'd also like to say that you think that there's an infinite amount of time to edit anything, but there's anything but with anything you work on, no matter what the project, the budget, everything gets shifted at 4:30 on a Friday. It gets handed to somebody who needed it 2 weeks ago to have it ready by Saturday morning.
Meanwhile, Bosch returns to the soup kitchen to ask about the subjects of George's photos, and Shepard is nervous. There's something more going on, he suspects correctly, and that is, among the growing list of missing persons, and in fact, the woman that opened the movie, is Bosch's wife, played by Daniel Stern's wife.
Nice.
So Shepard takes a look, he identifies Mrs. Monroe, and he asks for some info in return. The quote-unquote routine EPA probe of the tunnels, which normally takes a week, is going on 4, and it's making his customers jumpy. He also found some radiation detecting equipment, but calling multiple agencies and speaking to a handful of people led nowhere, so he takes Bosch down directly, and they find a Geiger counter, which goes wild when they turn it on, right before we hear a roar. What a great tease of the monster. Like, to have this be pure sound design is so awesome.
I love that. It's a great move when you can pull it off. I love it.
Yeah. George finally returns home. He's covered in grime from his journey, and the doctor's call was saying that Lauren is pregnant. They decide together that they're excited about it. I think this is a really cute scene.
Yeah, it is. It's very sweet. And, the same with that pimple scene.
Right.
Those little moments, you get to see them have a spat, but you also get to see how they deal with the spat.
But a little girl is in a phone booth with her granddad. She spots the C.H.U.D emerging, but too late, and the granddad is quickly taken. They were already lost, and now she's alone in New York. It's like a really grim scene to follow up that last one.
Oh, yeah. just and the weird, like, hanging on the girl, just that, again, it goes back to this, like, there's moments that are scary, and then there's moments that are just sad. Because they're developing these characters. It's really important to develop characters. It's the Stephen King trick where you've got to make the characters likable and then you've got to kill them. But in the case where like, and it is kind of a Stephen King moment to have it like, you could see that written in one of his books where it's just the grandfather was there 1 second and now she's alone. And you get a little bit of time to just look at her and imagine like what she's going through, the trauma and the fear and the confusion and the shock, right? She's just sitting there in shock, which is really like one of the only things you can get a child actor to do right is sit quietly and look unhappy.
Especially compounded by the way, she makes her way to the police and Bosch is perturbed and he is our stand-in. We are similarly perturbed because we know that it's true that she saw this monster. Officer Crespi is laughing it up. He thinks it's hilarious that this little girl claims she saw a monster that took her grandfather. The fact that she made it to a police station, communicated what happened, and this guy is like, oh, that's fucking cute, kid. Yeah. It's just so frustrating, tragic, indicative of the truth.
It's a different context for like an old trodden trope of, monsters. I don't believe in monsters, but it's like, and you're showing, okay, it is just a kid, but you've got this whole angle of you saw it. You saw what she went through, and now you're like, oh man, this is just a horrible situation. Yeah. This is just, and again, I like it, but I also see where it turns from just being a horror film into being like, this is a depressing drama.
Well, Bosch has had enough. He calls the chief and he says, hey, tell the commissioner I'm on my way to accuse him of an NRC cover-up. I thought it was very polite of him to give them this warning. He says, j'accuse.
Prepare to be accused, sir.
Yeah. They also break into Cooper's place for evidence, finding the photos of Victor's nasty-ass leg, and they use this as the coup de grace in their meeting, shutting up the glib NRC rep Wilson and the police commissioner. So Wilson reveals that they've stashed a large amount of nuclear waste because the court order preventing them from moving it through Manhattan was a lose-lose. It's already here, and now they can't move it out, he says. But what about the damn monster? You saw it. I'm not prepared to concede the existence of a monster is a very funny line from Wilson, in my opinion.
Is that what you're going to tell people? That you believe in monsters? That you're afraid of monsters? It's like trying to shame him into like shutting up.
That's right.
And I love that character, his angle, and the thought process and the voicing behind that character is so well written because it's like you don't find out till later really what his leverage is, and it's nothing. And it's really, there's like, oh, we didn't need to go through this except because of you. It's just a you problem. It's really not. Yeah. Again, it brings it to that Wire thing where it's like, it's not the government. It's specific people making decisions because they're put in positions of responsibility and they do the right thing or they don't do the right thing to varying degrees. Sometimes you help people out and you don't steal funds and other times you create chuds.
That's right.
It happens. It happens to the best of us.
Who hasn't been there? George Martin as Wilson, I think, is really fantastic. He is a great, smarmy bureaucrat. Does a great job with it.
Yeah. It's great that there's at least 3 guys in the room that are sort of bumbling and they don't really know what the other one wants or what the other one thinks or what their angle should be. They're all sort of like, we don't need to meet with you. And then it's like, oh, I guess you don't want my photos. And it's like, what? Maybe I'll just destroy them right now. It's like I have their copies. It's like, well, we'll destroy them. The bungling, also the ineptness. It's just it rings so true.
And Shepard freaks out and he says, "See you on the front page." He threatens them as he storms out.
Yeah, you're a liar, buddy.
Yeah,
at least you kept your mouth shut. And he's just throwing stuff at each other.
Yeah, he tosses the briefcase. That's it was funny in the commentary. Daniel Stern was like, "Everyone shut up. This is my moment." He made them all actually watch it. Very funny.
I love that. That even today, he's like, even for C.H.U.D, he's like, everybody, come on, this is, I did something here. And he really did. I mean, I'll say more than anything in that movie, that was the moment that truly won me over for C.H.U.D, was that scene. The fact that they included that scene that really it had no business being in a movie at that time and that world. It just is like being in a monster horror movie with the billing of like, schlocky monsters coming in slime, coming from the sewers. They're going to get you. And it's like a realistic interaction of a soup kitchen worker fighting against the bureaucracy of these 3 different department heads. It's like, why? No one asked for this. And it's so brilliant. And it's just so emotional. You're just like, yeah, fuck these guys. These guys are terrible.
Yeah.
You tell them, Dan.
You sign up for Sewer Monsters, you get Dan Stern channeling Michael Moriarty.
Yeah.
and we're better for it.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And we haven't talked a lot about that. You briefly talked about Q, but it does have a Larry Cohen kind of feel to it. It's kind of surprising that he wasn't involved in any way.
Yeah. It feels of his ilk, right? It's sort of,
right.
He is your favorite filmmaker's favorite filmmaker kind of thing.
Yeah. What is Bone? Why does it start like this? I mean, this is a brilliant short about, what used car salesmen do to people. But why is it here now?
You just gotta let King Larry go off, man.
Absolutely.
Just let him go off.
Absolutely. We're all the better for it.
Yep. So in the park now, Lauren is trying to convince George to move out to the suburbs, where he is approached by Murphy, a freelance journalist who's been popping up a lot around the police station. And he warns George that he's being tailed by the police and wants a story, but George and Lauren quickly depart in a cab. The veil is lifted now, though. This is the key thing. Is not that he approaches them, but now they see the tail and they see the cover-up in action.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of Shepard's rage, Bosch finds a file with the name C.H.U.D on it and demands to know what the heck that is. And they say 2 gas company guys just found it. A cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller. A C.H.U.D, all right?
Yeah, what do you think? There's a locker room? That's top secret.
And Wilson also claims it's dead and that the problem is solved.
Yeah.
And they go to view the corpse, and it says, there's every indication this was once human. It's wearing the rags of a Bowery bum.
A Bowery bum.
The man leading them through as they're all bundled in radiation suits. But it was death by asphyxiation, gas leak, and they consider it job done. A freak accident. It couldn't happen again, Wilson assures Bosch. But when Bosch says he's going to double check with flamethrowers, Wilson says, hey, bitch, no, you will not.
There must have been just a month where they're writing this and they're just so pleased with themselves. And they got alliterations everywhere, and they got this great cast of characters that are all interwoven into this city story that's bigger than the characters. It's about the cities. It's about politics. It's about who we are in our culture at this time. And it's going to have a monster in it. So that means I'm going to make a ton of money. So in their minds, the writers must have just been like, this is it for me. I mean, my life is going to change. It did not.
They thought it was. They saw it. They visualized
right.
it and couldn't manifest it, unfortunately.
Yeah, take that, Jim Carrey.
Bosch was one step ahead of Wilson, though, and his force is already down there with the flamethrowers. Yeah. They watch with the NRC crew's cameras as they inspect the sewers and get freaking devoured by a C.H.U.D, despite the flames. Wilson obstinately refuses to warn people. Meanwhile, George arrives home and realizes his photos are gone, and he contacts Murphy, who warns him again of this cover-up, and that we gotta go down there now, he says. Bosch warns Shepard of the creature as well, plus the plans, to flood the sewers with gas, he tells him about. This isn't the safest place to be, but Shepard has to cook dinner, responsible to the end, his brother's keeper, watching over the flock, all the baggage that is carried in his name, Reverend Shepard, is manifesting here. I do love this cut over to Wilson, who's convincing the others of his plan to blow up, or to flood it with gas. They say, you're gonna blow up the whole city. And he goes, no, just a section of Soho. It's like, oh, sorry, Soho.
Yeah, that attitude of, it's so laissez-faire, it's so just casually like the nuclear arms race attitude of like, it's happening somewhere else. Like, I could cause as much devastation I want as long as it's somewhere I don't live. It doesn't matter to me.
Definitely. It honestly does. This is a much more grim story than anything Chud could hope for. But the move bombing here in Philadelphia, like, it does sort of feel a little akin to that in terms of the sort of who cares about the people around them and what it's going to do to the neighborhood, not only in the immediacy, but in the aftermath as well. Who gives a shit? Like, that was basically the attitude.
Yeah. So it was 79 was the original move altercation. 85 was the bombing,
Right.
when they moved over to Osage. But before they were in Powelton, and that was when they attacked the compound, killed one of their own cops. They ordered the house because it was a crime scene for which, what was it, 8 guys? But they, for one bullet to the back of one guy's head, and they had no guns, no firing pins in their guns. They were all sent to prison. They were all sentenced for murder.
Right.
And I mean, none of them could have shot the guy. None of them did shoot the guy. Also, if anybody in their group did shoot the guy, it could only be one person.
Right.
I don't know how big the trigger loop was on those guns back then. 9 guys could pull the trigger at the exact same time, somehow getting behind the 12 combined rugby teams that were the small army of Rizzo's little army there.
Right.
And then the judge ordered the house demolished that night instead of checking for evidence of any kind. And then they went in and famously beat all the people who lived in the area to strike fear in their hearts. They went into their homes in the neighborhood, all for real estate. Yeah, so I would say those stories for sure are very reminiscent of a story like C.H.U.D.
Yeah.
Although C.H.U.D. does focus a lot more on what feels a lot more like white actors living out their not really squalid lives.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Shepard does warn Val on his way out. Val is extremely on edge. He is pretty creepy here. And they say in the commentary, Shep Abbott, he says this is much more what C.H.U.D. was sort of intended to be in his mind when he wrote the initial story treatment, was like the idea of just Val being very sick and on edge and a human cannibal, basically, as opposed to a freak.
Yeah, that doesn't work nearly as well. Seeing the neck at the end, sort of stretch out, I mean, you can't, that's not going to work.
Right.
If you've got just a normal human head, it's so much easier to accomplish that when you've already left reality.
The guy tailing Shepard from the NRC pushes Val off the ladder from his hiding spot, killing him and then locking the Rev down there. This guy is something else. I forgot to mention earlier that when Shepard tries to make a phone call after storming out of the conference and he eats the dime, what is the most badass thing I've ever seen in my fucking life.
Just and Daniel Stern's reaction is just like nothing. He's like,
fuck, you did it. You beat me.
Yeah, can't say anything. Just walks away like completely defeated. Yeah. No response at all, really.
What can you say?
Just it's over.
Yeah.
Going back to what he said about I didn't want these big monsters to be. It's like, what movie did you? Who is this movie for?
Who knows, man?
I've definitely been that guy where I've pitched ideas to people and been like, this is going to be so cool. And they're like, this is for no one. This is for you by yourself. And that's what I love about C.H.U.D. It's for me.
There you go. Hey, sometimes it works.
Yeah.
Murphy is dragged away by the C.H.U.D. and George loses his shit, both me and the character, because it's a super fun flash of the monster. He gets sucked into this damn tunnel like a friggin' spaghetti. Shepard's crawling through the tunnels. He's looking for an exit. He finds a whole damn group of C.H.U.D.s, 4 of them crawling around this goopy nest. It's great stuff. The Geiger counter portends they're chasing him in a really fun way. Just a cool scene.
Yeah.
Back at home, Lauren checks out that basement entrance and finds not a C.H.U.D. as we expect, but the dog from the beginning hanging from its leash, which is nasty.
Yeah, very, very gross. Geiger counter's great. You've got that preemptive tension. It's something here, and it's clicking. It's like the in Aliens when they've got they're closing on us. They're in the room. I'm reading it right, man. Like you've got that feeling of like it's there. Like the instrument is telling us, but they can't see it yet. What is happening?
Definitely.
Brilliant.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that comparison specifically because in that Fangoria interview that I was reading, the producer, Andrew, was talking about how, those facts that I mentioned earlier are sort of the superstructure of the movie. And then from that point, he was like, okay, now our goal is to make the scariest movie possible utilizing this. And so he was like, we watched Alien and a lot of Hitchcock movies and Jaws. And we're just like, what is working about these that we can use in our movie as well to make it scary and then take it one step further was his goal. And I think that is visible in these moments of things like using the Geiger counter to have that tension rise with just using the sound design. It is really effective work.
I want to say, too, it's a common misconception, I think, that we all start with as artists is that there is originality, that we need to somehow achieve this originality. It's got to be different, but it's also got to be something people want to see. And how do we do that? And that's what a great filmmaker does. And really what great filmmakers that you love do is they watch movies they like and they're like, that part, that goes in my movie with my characters.
That's sick. I love that.
And it's really just that's it. Talking about aliens, there's I just saw somebody make this comparison. I forget which the Ant movie was. That Phase 4? Phase 4. There are a ton of shots that are just pulled straight from Phase 4. You know, the same with Star Wars. You see like the comparisons to the old footage, the flight footage, the dogfight scenes, even the look of the POV shots looking out from the cockpits. You're like, oh, the design is from this too.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's the thing though, right? Is you see what works. You say, how can I execute this slightly differently so that it works in my movie as well with the thematics and everything. And yeah, that's how you make a good movie, baby.
I think that it's important to, get your head on right too. And it's really tough to do because most of art education is garbage. It's really bad. It teaches you the wrong thing for the wrong reason. Even talk about like commerce being the problem is they prolong things that have no substance without focusing on things that are substantive. And they sort of get you in a cult-like manner to focus on things that are unattainable like art. And in some ways, I think that that's important because it's important for people to push themselves and to drive out, to be individuals as artists. However, instead of looking at it like I need to be original, it's more like the way I typically look at it. It's almost like imagine you live in a smaller village in a simpler time. And every year there is a traditional festival. And in this festival, everybody participates in their small way. People bring sculptures and people bring food and people dance and it's all of this that comes together, right? Every year it happens and every year there's a unique new generation and they all want to put their small spin on it and they do. But there's certain things that have to happen. There's certain things that they have to go through to understand how to do honor to the tradition. And I think that's a better way to look at it, is how I typically look at it as I think about it like that. Instead of trying to be original, I just try to do what other people are doing. And then I end up being a little bit more unique than I expected to be, because ultimately I have ideas I want to shove in there too.
Right. It's going to filter through you in some way because it's coming from
Because it's you. You are unique.
Interesting. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
This is at the same time that Bosch is being led to the site of a body washing ashore, and it is his wife. Everyone's getting surprised all over town.
Yeah. It's his wife.
It was kind of weird since she is actually Daniel Stern's wife, so he was quite shocked in the commentary to see this intense decapitated head prop that looked quite good but wasn't in the released cut. So that was put back in. He hadn't seen this prop that was made of his poor dead wife.
Yeah.
And they're in the commentary. He goes, oh my God.
Yeah. Talk about an audience of one.
Yeah. I don't like that at all.
Right.
He also does confirm that it was her walking the dog back in the beginning, a habit she picked up staying all night studying now that she was back in college. College kills, folks.
That's right. Don't go to school. What do we just say? They teach you crap there. You got to be street smart.
That's right. You get all these habits that get you killed by Chud.
Yeah. You think you got 150-pound Chud coming at you, barreling down an old sewer? He's going to stop to listen. I don't know what I'm talking about.
He's going to say, a degree in film from Barnard University.
Yeah. I won't hang your dog. You've got a Bachelor of Arts.
Boy, I think it's Barnard College. I fucked up the one name that I chose. I could have picked literally a million universities that I actually know the name of.
Yeah, we're both getting tired.
Yeah, all right. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
The problem is, in her shock, Lauren didn't relock the basement. So the C.H.U.D is emerging while she's in the shower. This scene is psycho as hell. It was confirmed in the commentary, but I was definitely picking that up ahead of time. But it also subverts that, because in the drain, so famously effective in Psycho, backs up and shoots blood at her when she tries to snake it.
Yeah.
It's a really fun reversal.
Awesome.
So it doesn't make quote-unquote sense.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit?
Oh, did it not make sense for some reason? I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
That is one of those failings I have where I'm like, yeah, that just is cool. It never occurred to me until you just said it that it doesn't make sense. Now that I think about it, no, that doesn't make a lick of sense. But I mean, look at a guy like Christopher Nolan. Has he ever directed a scene that made a lick of sense if you actually thought about it for a minute?
Just like here, it doesn't matter.
That's right. A lot of times with film and art in general, it's more about how you feel.
That's right. John Goodman shows up as a cop in a Greasy Spoon diner. He's supposed to be watching the streets, but he's distracted by the waitress's legs, and he misses the approaching horde of chuds. They break in and attack as a man on the street panics and runs, climbing right over our intrepid director. This was actually the final scene originally, which is wild.
What?
Yeah.
How?
The chuds just attack.
Yeah.
They lose.
That is bananas. I mean, where it is makes sense. It works. Not that this movie has a real ending, but like, that is not anything. That is like a projector's turn off or something like that. If you cut after that, that'd be really confusing.
They were like, yeah, that's why you don't see any of the actual fight or anything.
Right.
It was just they break the glass and everyone screams and then that's it. But
I guess I can kind of see it. I guess I can kind of see the thinking, at least in the script phase where, but yeah, man, you got to it's thank God for pre-visualization. You can shoot all this stuff on your phone before you have to deal with it in reality. Now it's not fair to talk shit about people back then.
They're living on a hope and a dream back then.
Oh my God.
God, I hope the dailies come out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. That, yeah. Checking the gate and the dailies and, not, and all linear editing and
yeah,
that's crazy.
The boy from downstairs is just about to open a banging door when he's called away for dinner, but this motherfucker doesn't need someone to open the door because it's a goddamn C.H.U.D. He smashes right through. Everyone talked about how annoying and demanding this kid was, and that they were like, oh, we wish we got it torn up on screen.
Well, that's actually what C.H.U.D stands for, is child having unfortunate dinner.
What the heck? It's all becoming quite clear. The attack has given Wilson the only go-ahead he needs to move ahead with his gas plan, just as George stumbles across the munched-on body of Hugo and Victor, curled up in the corner. When he approaches, though, Victor wheels and attacks, because he's mid-transformation into a C.H.U.D.
I love this reading.
George shoots him in self-defense, but it's not until the double tap that he's dead. And then this scene kind of gets funny for me, where it's like a Matryoshka doll of people jumping out at him. First Victor, and then Mrs. M attacks him, and she's like, how dare you kill my brother?
Yeah.
And then Shepard jumps out and attacks her.
Yeah, it's a mess. But it also feels like, okay, yeah, that's what would happen. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But it does smack of somebody who has not made a bunch of films, doesn't have a lot of experience, is not taking advice from seasoned veterans who are like, that's not how you want to make that scene. They're like, this is how it would happen, man. You can't tell me how to make my movie, Dad. I'm going to be rich and I'm going to be cool.
That's right. Just wait until the bell jar hits. Yeah. People will rediscover it. It also does facilitate the line, thank God your soup kitchen delivers.
Yeah.
Which is very, very funny.
Jesus Christ. I forgot about that line.
Wilson seals the manhole covers that lead out of the area, but the C.H.U.Ds are already on the loose, and in fact, one is attacking Lauren. So, shutting the barn door after the horse has already escaped. They're already on the streets of New York. Doesn't matter if you shut down the fucking sewer grates.
That's right. It's too late. Cat's out of the bag. C.H.U.D's out of the sewer.
That's right. We got to get that saying to catch on. I don't know what we're doing here. While trying to find a way out, George and Shepard stumble across a pile of radioactive waste. It says Contamination Hazard Urban Disposal, C.H.U.D for short, and the true meaning of the cover-up's acronym, years worth that Wilson must have been dumping here for years, they say.
Acronym.
That was the word we were looking for.
Acronym. Not a mandala.
They also find the feeding den full of body parts. It's pretty nasty, and these are from the last batch of guys we saw, so they also stumble across the camera, unfortunately damaged. Curse you, C.H.U.Ds! They pull a headset off a decapitated head. They do manage to get some audio. And the sleepy tech on the other side is shocked. Who are you? He asks. Very funny delivery from this tech.
Yeah.
He does get in touch with Bosch, though, and Bosch dashes off, directing them to an exit manhole, but not before Shepard warns Bosch about Wilson's true nature. Laura's screams are being ignored by the neighborhood, and the C.H.U.D gets in, so she cuts the power, lures it into the dark room where she blinds it with chemicals, grabs a decorative sword off the wall, chops its gall-darn head off.
Yeah, she's got a Ripley moment right there. And she's such a great actress to pull something like that off, because she so fluidly can sell being vulnerable and being strong.
Yeah. Yeah. This thing is also becomes like 40% neck, so it really opens itself up to neck chopping, to be honest.
Yes.
Also, green goopy blood, they were talking about how they just used a shitload of the glow stick fluid, you know, tale as old as time.
Yeah, well, yeah, who knows what was in it back then.
The gas is getting to Shepard as the two of them run for the manhole, and Bosch is intercepted by Wilson, who goes with him. "Step over here into the shadows," says the spider to the fly. Bosch reveals everything he knows. "You're not from the NRC at all. You're the government garbage man."
Yeah, that's right.
Wilson pulls a gun on him. He says, "I can't let you do this." And Bosch knocks his damn block off with a punch and gets the keys that he's like dangling. He's like, "You mean these keys that you need?" The men are at the manhole, but it's still blocked, and they were going to have Reverend's eyes glow here to indicate he'd been C.H.U.D.ed while down there.
Yeah.
But they talked about there being some kind of scandal about them finding human DNA in the sewers that had producers kind of hemming and hawing about releasing it at all. They wound up cutting some of this movie instead of just including that thread. I couldn't really find anything specific about that. It might have just been the general recombinant DNA buzz. If people out there know what he's referring to in New York City around 1983, truly, please comment on the thread for this episode on Instagram or Reddit.
Oh,
or
yeah.
You can just email the mailbag, bestlittlemailbag@gmail.com, because I'm really curious. I could not find what controversy they were talking about or alluding to on the commentary.
Oh,
so
that's fascinating. What could that be? I mean, I wasn't reading newspapers back then. I think I was 1 year old.
And it's honestly fucked up that you weren't reading newspapers, because you should be informed.
I'll tell you what's really fucked up is I'm not reading newspapers now. I have never read newspapers. I have a hard time reading newspapers.
Wow, there could be recombinant DNA in the sewers right this very moment, and you wouldn't even know.
Look, in case you haven't noticed, I get my news from The Wire.
Wow, and from C.H.U.D. Bosch is hustling over. Lauren is arriving to try and get Wilson to shut off the gas. The plots are converging. Wilson recovers. He hustled over too. And he shoots Bosch in the back. And then he goes to drive the truck over them.
Yeah, the truck over the manhole, yeah.
But Shepard grabs Bosch's gun. He shoots Wilson and the truck fucking explodes. Crazy effect. As is always the case, it was much bigger than they expected. The thing you see fly off it almost nailed the actress. Stunt coordinator had to shove her aside in order to save her fucking life as this goddamn truck exploded.
Oh, Jesus.
Wild, wild stuff. And as we sort of talked about at the beginning when we mentioned the ending, they sort of just grapple with what happened in the glow of the flames as we crane out. It's really fucking awesome.
And you know that shit was on fire, and there was a lot of just the director screaming, "Reset, move here, crane up, look it like this, hurry, just keep going, just keep going." They would have been doing that for as long as they possibly could, not to lose the consistency of that fire.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it works, baby.
Does it?
You don't think it works? I think it works.
The ending?
I think it works.
Is that an ending? I mean, it ends there.
I think it is an ending in the same way that I think it's going for the same thing that the original ending was going for, in that it is like sort of executing this suddenness of the ending and saying like, okay, you stopped this one thing. Now what? Like the C.H.U.Ds are out. This didn't actually accomplish anything. And because it ends that quickly, that's your last emotion, right? That's the thing that you sit with is like, okay, what next? I think that it leaves you with the mystery in a good way.
The original ending is so funny to think about what that would look like. I mean, it'd be easy to splice that together and take a look at what that looked like. Instead of just ending on the crane up and the you have this chaos going on, right? And then it just smash cuts to cops getting a cup of coffee and checking out the waitress's legs. Nothing going on here. And then just like the smashing glass and the, and turning around, and it's like, C.H.U.D. That was C.H.U.D. You watched C.H.U.D.
That's right. You just watched C.H.U.D, dog.
You just got C.H.U.D. C.H.U.D stands for you just watched C.H.U.D.
That's right. It's a clear acronym.
Right. It is an acronym. I think it makes a lot more sense now that they had a different plan. I don't think the original plan would have been better. It is what they really needed to do. You know what's a great example of what it didn't come out till a couple of years later, and maybe this was part of the inspiration of like how to end a story better, was Return of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. Has that great energy of it cutting away and showing the, okay. And how long ago was that? And how many did you see? Okay. And he's turning the keys, and then they blow up the city, and then they're like, it's all right. There's a couple fires, but the rain should put that out. And then the music comes up.
Right.
And it implies that it's gotten out of control, which I think is what the intention sounds like it was for C.H.U.D. And they're probably just thinking of how can we shoot this and make it look like it's getting out of control. And then they, like we were talking about earlier, retrofitting, scaling things back. They probably started to eat a little too deep into there. And then it didn't make sense anymore. And they're like, well, that's what we can shoot. So that's what we're going to shoot. And that's how it's going to work. So,
I mean, it makes sense to me. And now, Josh, we've reached the part of the episode where we sum up why this isn't just a good horror movie, but is in fact the best horror movie ever made. And I'm going to let you start.
I mean, I feel like I interrupted you so many times telling what the story is and for this very purpose and why it's so great. I will sum it up, though. And here I now go summing up in a quick fashion why C.H.U.D. is great by Josh Jones. In conclusion.
5-paragraph essay. Here we go.
C.H.U.D. is great because it's got great writing that is not necessarily great screenwriting. It's not necessarily all put together, but it's like half of what you need to make an incredible timeless film. And that's so much more. Half of what you need to make an incredible timeless film is so much more than I think anybody would expect out of a production that's that scale with that group of people, that a lot of them elevated that movie in a way that you wouldn't expect out of movies of its peers at the time necessarily. And it's strange that it came out at the same time as Ghostbusters, which, notoriously had the zaniest and most unbelievable, ridiculous script ever, the original script by Dan Aykroyd, which makes no sense. There's parallel dimensions and nonsense. It's just all of that. None of the groundedness.
The ghost fully fucks him instead of it just sucking his dick. It's a whole...
It's a lie. With the original script, if you don't know about it, it's a thing. And it makes nothing but trouble look very, very tame and simple.
Yeah, that's right. I remember Venkman had the dick nose still. So.
Down to earth. And C.H.U.D., I can't help but think about it when we're talking about it, about its production and people's intentions with it and what they hope for it, which is every movie. And that excitement registers on the screen. You do end up with some serious problems. We talked about some of the performances being incredible, and we talked about some of the performances not being any good. And that honestly, to me, just adds to the charm of a film. It's just one more of those films that, like, through sheer will was brought into this world.
That's right.
And unfortunately, they had to go through that pain of it. People being like, well, that bomb didn't make money. Your score is low, and so you're a bad person. You should feel bad. And I'm sure they probably did feel like shit, especially because they probably thought they were going to be both rich and cool. After subverting horror and making people are going to see this. It's all these things I've been thinking about for so long. In my mind, I know it's perfect. In my mind, I know it's great. And then it comes out and people are like, no, I don't like you. Get away from me. Mm-hmm. And then years later, people have babies and the babies have babies. And before you know it, there are legions of people who are compatible with C.H.U.D.
That's right. And they love C.H.U.D.
Love C.H.U.D.
They love C.H.U.D.
They love it. And it's also something to say about filmmaking in general and making anything that's art. It's not about the audience necessarily. I think it's really important to think about the audience and to think about how they're going to understand what you're doing and what your intentions are to the degree that that's appropriate. But Also, the score means nothing. The awards mean nothing. C.H.U.D will never make as much money as Madame Web made, you know? And that is, I just saw that last night with a couple of friends of mine, and that's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. And hilariously, really fun, dumb piece of garbage. Insanity. Just pure unbridled. Who would ever think this was fine? And nobody seemed to care about it. No one was really like at the wheel. They're just sort of like, yeah, this is our job. We're doing it. and that's not C.H.U.D. C.H.U.D is like those movies, Brain Damage and Basket Case and Frankenhooker.
Oh, yeah. Henenlotter.
Henenlotter. Exactly. Who you watch those movies and you're like, this guy just made movies for himself. He just knew what he wanted to do. Yeah. And he was obsessed enough and driven enough and just happened to be in a place where he could do it. And he did it, and now we've got it. And that's incredible. That means so much more than whether or not it had great box office. You know, it affected people.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like the Van Gogh of early 80s horror movies.
So true. Everybody's saying it, folks. It's the Van Gogh of early 80s cinema. To me, this is the best horror movie ever made, because one thing that production designer William Billowit said is that because these movies were so independently made, they could go in imaginative and even aberrative directions, but that would let them leave a deep impression. And this has it in spades. You know, it's not an easy shoot. It's a heat wave. It's dirty. They're low budget. But as Caglione said, pain is temporary. Film is forever. And I think that ethos is all over this movie. It's held together with duct tape, but they put the work in, they stretched their dollar, and goddamn it, they made C.H.U.D. They made it fucking work. And at the end, they put out something that does look fucking good.
Yeah.
But what makes it such effective horror, beyond just fun monster, you know, there's good effects and stuff. Sure, that's all nice. But it's really about subverting that social dynamic. And I find it to be really, really effective. The upper crust and their cronies don't care about these people. So they dump a bunch of toxic waste in their home, but that resulting change leapfrogs them in the pecking order. So now they're strong predators picking us off in the night, which we find out these upper crust cronies are fine with. And you realize you're a lot closer to being a C.H.U.D than you are to being one of these guys at the top. You know, George the sensitive artist feels it and is embittered by it, clarified through his disconnection from high fashion. Bosch, as we said, realizes it after doing their dirty work and still getting no preferential treatment when the tragedy strikes close to home. The terror of being the underclass won't stay buried when the underclass continues to grow. Over the past 50 years, household incomes have grown 3 times faster for the top 20% than the middle 20%. That wealth and power is accumulating at the top, and they'll trap you in the sewers with the monsters and the gas in order to retain it. They will happily make you a C.H.U.D and happily blow up Soho in order to make sure that you stay in this section and not in their section. And I think that there is such a bite to this movie that does get kind of overlooked a lot of the time. I think that people do just look at it as kind of a silly monster movie, and that political edge that it has is a lot less recognized than it might be in something like Q the Winged Serpent. And I think that they are sort of a great double feature if you want that sort of thing. They're peas in a pod. They're talking about very similar things, and I think that they both do it very effectively. And that's what makes this the best horror movie ever made.
Hear, hear.
Josh, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was super, super fun. Please tell the folks where they can follow along with your work, where they can check you out online, all that stuff.
Anything that says No Master Lives is us. We're kind of a mess with that, but we've got an Instagram. You can follow us at No Master Lives. You know, we've got a Bandcamp coming out soon. That's No Master Lives. There's nothing up on it. We have tons of stuff that just has to finish getting mastered and some cassettes that have to be made. But for right now, we're pretty underground. None of our shorts are available online unless you own a t-shirt that has a code on it that lets you watch it by design. More stuff will be coming out. But, you know, if you want to see stuff, look out for us. We'll be around.
There you go. Get in on the ground floor, folks.
That's right. Get involved.
I highly encourage you all to do that, because everything that I have seen from Josh and Co. has been just delightful. So yeah, definitely follow along with No Master. As far as my plugs, I am basically no longer promoting the Patreon because, as people may or may not have seen on social media, the show is in its outro We are concluding the show on the 5th anniversary. It will be 200 movies covered. October 7th, 2024. Happens to line up perfectly. I said, this is a great springboard out of here. So, I'll be talking about this more as we get closer, but just so people know, we're sort of wrapping things up. So instead of guiding people towards the Patreon, I will say, hey, check out the back catalog, because I have put a shitload of work into this podcast over the years. And there are a lot of movies that, much like C.H.U.D, I don't think necessarily got their due. Maybe it's just because it's movies that people haven't seen. So I encourage people not only to listen to the back catalog, but to use it as a movie list. Go watch a movie that's on the list that you haven't seen yet. Maybe it's C.H.U.D, and maybe you haven't even seen it yet, and you're listening to this episode about C.H.U.D and saying, maybe I should go watch C.H.U.D. That's the one. Go do that. Go watch Hour of the Wolf, our last episode. Ingmar Bergman, incredible film that is so heartbreakingly self-defensive, but it's really, really great stuff, and some really freaky, fucked up imagery in there. So much great stuff. So yeah, go check out a movie that you haven't seen that's on the list. That's your homework out there, everybody. And
George, I just want to say this is a fantastic podcast. You have done a ton of work. You put a lot of research just into, us just talking today. I'm like, I've looked into C.H.U.D before and a little bit of prep work before I got into this and rewatched it. And you came prepared with a lot of stuff and a lot of insight that isn't available everywhere. And I really love this podcast. I really love everything that you've done. And no matter what happens, it's an incredible body of work, and it's an achievement.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. And yeah, hey, go check out that achievement out there, folks. go listen to one. All right, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.